Amen. Amen. Okay, so the title of my message this morning is an invitation that changes everything. And I'm going to speak about Joseph this morning. And I know for some of you, before I even start, it's one of those stories that we hear continuously, about Joseph. We hear different things about him. And when we hear it being preached again, we're like, oh, I probably heard that being preached 100 times. And hopefully this morning that I can just bring something fresh directly from the Lord's heart and that you can catch what he wants to say. And before we start reading, I'm just going to tell you a little story about an invitation that changed everything in my life. And so there was one night I was walking home from town, and I literally was like, it was pretty late enough, and when you're like, it's like one of those evenings where you're like, I'm not going to get a taxi, the public transport's not going anymore. I met a friend, we had literally chatted for hours, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to head home, I'll walk home. It was reasonably bright enough, not too bright, but enough for me to feel confident in walking home. And so I started out walking anyway, and as I'm walking home, I'm coming down the road, and I can see, I don't know whether any of you know, if you are from the area around here, like the Avenue Road. And I've actually talked to Eunice about this, about walking down this road plenty of times, and she walks it too. And I was walking down really late one night, and when you feel like someone's following you. And so I'm already nervous. I was confident, then I'm like, there's someone following me. This is not I was so confident, then I'm like, you're taking your steps longer, then your pace has started to get faster and faster, and you're picking it up, and you're like, no, no, I need to. And so I kept walking, and it was to a point where I was like walking that fast that when you're nearly like out of breath, you're like, it was such a good idea at the start. Now and these whole scenarios go through your head. I'm going to be kidnapped. Someone's going to kill me. My parents are never going to know where I am. My family are going to go. And you start creating the worst case scenario in your head. And there's probably someone not even following you. This is the way you be. And so I was at that point where I was like, you know what? There's some. Oh gosh. And so I got to near enough my estate. Where I was, and I was keep walking, and I still had it in my head. There was people walking behind me, like they're following me. They're coming into my state. They know where I live. And I created this big scenario. And there came a point where I got to this state, and I heard this voice, and it was like, Áine. And I'm like, oh, they know my name. They know my name. Not only are they following me, not only am I, but they know my name. And the voice wasn't even behind me. It was ahead of me. And I was like, they're even in front of me, And you're like, no, they know my name. Now they've got 2 sets, and I'm going to be taken, And I got to the point where I got so worked up, and I was like, it was like, when you feel like, I can almost say like there was just this darkness where you're like, I'm dead. And the voice came and said, Áine, come here, Áine, it's me. And I was like, it's at this point, like, my eyesight's not great at the best of times. I have contact lenses, so I wear glasses. So at night time, I'm cat, and I'm looking, and I'm going, who's calling me? It's someone who knows my name. Is this one of them who? And I couldn't recognize what was in front of me until eventually then I started taking. It was almost like I can describe as a step of faith. I was like, the voice was like, come on, come here. Do you see me? It's me. And I was like I said, and then I realized it was my big brother Shane. And so when you see, I got to the point where it was just this relief where he's like, yeah, whoever's behind me, here's my big brother. You're dead. Don't even try. And the sense of reassurance that my big brother, even though he probably didn't even realize that I was scared out of my wits, I was like, that's my big brother. And usually he visits my house. He lives out with his partner, and he had came, and he was like, I'm just visiting Mum. And I was like, I'm just going to walk the rest of the way with you, let's just walk. And we walked. And so I realized that was an invitation that changed everything. In order to see who my big brother was, I had to take a step closer and realize the power that he had in my life at that moment. And at that point I realized, gosh, my big brother is, and he wouldn't kill anyone, but I was like, I'm talking, I'm in my early 20s, and I'm like, that's my brother. And he didn't realize what he had done at that time as well. And this morning we're just going to speak about Joseph and just about the power that he had as a brother this morning, and the power that we have when we step a little closer to the person who can change everything. And so Joseph, just to give you a bit of context, Joseph was born into a family of 12 boys. He lived in Canaan. His father, I'm sure most of you know this, but just to give you a bit of a summary for those who mightn't be so familiar with the story, his father Jacob loved Joseph so much that he made him what? Come on, let's be interactive this morning. What did he? A coat of many colours. And his brothers got to a point where they were very jealous. A lot of things had built up on them at previous times, and I think when he came to them in the fields and said, I've had a dream, that was it for them. They were like, you know what you can do with your dream? We're going to take you now somewhere where that dream ain't going to come true. And so they got to a point where they had seen him off, grabbed him, took him, and they were like, they had plotted to kill him. And it came to the point where one of the brothers had said, no, let's not kill him. That's not a good idea. Let's just sell him. Bring a goat, like drip his coat into blood and tell our father that he was killed. It was goat's blood. And then sell him off. And so they eventually sold him off then. And not only to one person, then that person sold him on again. So when you think of it, Joseph wasn't even sold once. He was sold twice, which was even worse. And it was so far away from the dream that God had originally given him. And this morning I would say situations might happen in your life that might be so far away from the dream that God has given you, but that doesn't mean it won't come to pass. See, the Lord had given Joseph a dream. And everything that we look at this story, everything that is represented in this story belonging to Joseph, everything that he had gone through, would look and say, nah, that dream, I'm with Joseph's brother on this. That's not going to come to pass. I'm with them like this. Yeah, right, he's going to bow down. He was sold into slavery twice and ended up in a house where somebody's wife had tried to seduce him, and then he got put into prison. If you think life got so bad, it got even worse. But the thing about it is the Bible says that the Lord was with Joseph. And I would say to you this morning, everything that you face, and I mean everything, not just the small things, not just absolutely the big things, but everything that you face, I want to tell you this morning that the Lord is with you. He is with you through every step of the way you look at it. The footprints of God is through this whole story. The Lord had given Joseph the dream. It wasn't a man-made dream. It wasn't something that Joseph had brought up in his mind and he was like, you know what, this is what's going to happen. But it was something that the Lord had given him. And we need to stand firm on the dreams that God has given us this morning, because it's only through him that they will come to pass. Joseph ended up in prison then. Still in the summary, Joseph ended up in prison, and eventually then he was able to interpret some of the visions and the dreams that the baker and the cupbearer had in the prison. And that found favour with people in power, and they ended up then taking Joseph out, and he became, it's almost like you want to call it like a prime minister or a governor at that time in Egypt. And Joseph came to a place where you're looking at the story and you're saying, things have locked up, like maybe then, maybe the dream might come to pass, maybe. But this is the part of the story where I want to look at. And if you have your Bibles this morning, we're going to read from Genesis 45, verse 1. Joseph was put in charge at the time, just before I read it. And the dreams and the visions that was given, he had interpreted them to be that there was going to be famine in the land, and he was in charge of gathering all the food. And at the time Egypt was affected by it, but the land beside it, Canaan, was affected by it too, and that's where his brothers were. And the thing about it is his brothers eventually came to the place where Joseph was. Imagine his brothers had sold him into slavery, and they actually came to the place. The dream was being placed out in front of us before they hadn't a clue. They hadn't a clue what they had done first, and they hadn't a clue that Joseph was where he was at that time. And they came eventually to Joseph. And it says in Genesis 45:1, then Joseph could no longer control himself before all the attendants, and he cried out, have everyone leave my presence. So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and the Pharaoh's household heard about him. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still living? But the brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, come close to me. When they had done so, he said, I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine in the land. In the next 5 years there will be no plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Verse 4, then Joseph said to his brothers, come close to me. When they had done this, he said, I am your brother Joseph, the one who you sold into Egypt. Here we have it, the long lost brother. They haven't seen him in 20 years. They sold him when he was 17, and he'd gone through 13 years in the Potiphar's house, and then the 7 years had happened, and it was almost 20 years. Imagine, church, if anybody had an axe to grind in that story, it was Joseph. 20 years they're coming now after selling him, and he's gone through all this, and his attitude is immaculate. You look, if anybody had the right to have an attitude in this story, if anybody had a right to be like, get away from me, it was Joseph. And we face many situations just like Joseph in our time, and sometimes we don't have the heart of God in it. Sometimes we don't respond like Joseph. But I'm telling you now, when you respond the way Joseph responds, it changes everything. Our attitude, Pastor Peter said it, determines our altitude. And so many times that is so true in our lives. Sometimes the thing that we look at doesn't need to change, it's just us. We need to change in the situation. The situation might never change. But if the change takes place in us, it changes everything. They didn't even recognize him. It says in chapter 42, Joseph was the governor of the land. He was the one who sold grain to all its people. When Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them. But he pretended to be a stranger. He spoke to them in a mean way. Where do you come from, he asked. From the land of Canaan, they replied. We've come to buy food. Joseph recognized his brothers, but they didn't recognize him. I need you to take a step closer, Joseph said to his brothers. I need you. Here is an invitation, because I need you to see who I am. I need you to have a proper look and see exactly where I'm at. See, at the time we noticed that Joseph was in a place of authority. He had power. And if his brothers had just realized, if they had realized the power that was in front of them, what they had as their inheritance, this was their brother who was sitting in the throne. He had the decision to do everything. And he's calling out an invitation, and he's saying, come closer. Because it's only when you come close to me, it's only when you recognize who I am, then you'll recognize who you are. And this morning in your situations, church, you will only recognize the power that you have in your situations if you recognize who God is first. I'm telling you now, you will go through situations, you will go and you'll be like this, living in a land of famine, living in a place of isolation, living in a place where you need deliverance. And God is saying to you, come close to me. Come close to me so that you can see who I am. And then you can see who you are in that situation. Your situation can only change this morning when you recognize who he is. It's not enough, as Pastor Peter said this morning, to know the psalm. But we've got to know the shepherd. We've got to know the power that he has this morning. I'm telling you now, the invitation is set out. They didn't recognize him. It's such a tragedy that in that moment, his brothers didn't recognize who he was. He had gone from a place from rags to riches. And in that place, Joseph was like, if you only could see who I am, if you could only see the journey I took, the restoration that has taken place in my life, the rebuilding, what God has done. I've gone through every situation. You don't know what I faced. You look and you think, oh, it was just slavery, but I've gone through everything. I was accused. I didn't even do anything wrong, and yet I was placed in a prison. It wasn't my fault. But yet God is still in the business of restoring this morning. He's still in the business of rebuilding. I am the very same brother you sold when I was 17 years old. Look what God has done. Joseph gives the invitation for them to come near. They had no clue whatsoever that their lives could be changed forever. And just like that this morning, church, even though you know God, your life can change when you draw a little bit closer. All we've got to do is take that step of faith. Take that step for the rebuilding to happen. When the brothers took a step closer, they didn't see a coat of many colours. They didn't see a young boy who was bragging or even begging. They looked at a man, someone who had gone through many situations and seasons, and that God had raised up as a governor, a person of authority. See, if you look at the previous chapters, Joseph had got a ring from the king. And in that, he was able to stamp any invoice. There was power there. Any law that needed to be passed in the strongest nation, he could do that. And the king also embraced Joseph with a necklace which meant royalty. And I'm telling you now, if his brothers had grasped the invitation, that would have changed everything. They looked into their brother's eyes, and the very person that God had raised up was basically in charge of the country. And I would tell you this morning, church, you have a big brother this morning who is in charge of everything, who is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. But the only way we can realize that authority is if we take a step closer to him and see who he is. If you could grasp this and understand when you're in situations like famine in your life, you need to recognize who God is first. When Joseph's brothers opened their eyes, yes, they did see someone who was a governor, they did see someone who was an authority, but they also seen somebody who was the ruler of Egypt. Egypt, when we look at this story this morning, represents many things. And you could be sitting here this morning and you're thinking, you know what? For me, Egypt could represent, I'll tell you some of the things that it represent was slavery. 400 something years of chains. Egypt was a place of oppression, slavery, disappointment, pain, torture, heartache. I could keep going on. Egypt represented all of these things. And this morning, just like Joseph had sent out the invitation, Jesus is sending out the invitation for you and I, that he can become the ruler of your Egypt this morning if you allow him to. Every pain, every situation, every distress, everything that you claim that is famine, everything that claims to be above him, he's above that. Everything that claims to be higher than what you declare this morning, he's above that. He is saying this morning, if you would only let me be a part of your Egypt, if you would only let me rule your Egypt, then you would see exactly who I am. All of a sudden, they see him so differently. It clicked with them, not just a ruler, but a ruler over their personal Egypt. Everything, I mean everything, church. Not just the little things that we give to God, not just the areas that we think some people see, but everything. Everything that you worry about, everything that you're angry about, everything that there's pain in your life about. God is saying this morning, I'm above it. I can be the ruler of it if you allow me to. But you have to, the condition is you have to take a step closer. You know, there's so many times where I've been invited to birthday parties, and okay, let's be honest here. How many times have you been invited to a birthday party and you just don't want to go? Or you think, you know what, I'm a wee bit too busy, I can't make time for that. Or, you know what, I'm not feeling it today, I'm not. And there's many times where we've been invited and no one wants to put their hands up because it could be somebody in the room invited them. I understand that too. But there's many times where we've been invited to different things and you're like, I just don't want to go, like. But when I really look at it, there was a recent event that I was invited to, and I did say no. But I really, after it, I was kind of like mad at myself for saying no, because when I pondered on the fact that somebody had given me an invite to go somewhere, what they were really saying was, and what the person really says, whether you like it or not, they're saying that you mean something to me. I want you in my presence. I want you at something that means something to me. And if you're here this morning, you've got an invite through somebody else who's got an invite, then the thing about it is that person sees potential in you to be there. So either way, they want you in their presence or they see potential for you to be there. And this morning, God's the exact same. You might think this morning, oh, well, I'm not invited. I'm not good enough to be invited to that. You know what? I don't even know whether I want. But God sees something in you. He sees value and potential in you this morning and is inviting you to come. Sometimes we disqualify ourselves too soon because we're like, God would never want me. I have this going on. I lost the head this week. I said something I shouldn't have said. There's actually this much going on in my life right now. Different things have piled up. And you know what? The invitation to come, no, I really don't have time for that. Or he wouldn't even want anyone like me at the party. But God is saying to you this morning, if you would just realize, come. There's a rebuilding. There's a restoration that needs to take place. Jesus sends out the invitation. Come close to me. Take a step closer. He sees something different in you that nobody else sees. Still in chapter 45, verse 8. So then it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household and ruler of all Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and say to him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, don't delay. You shall live in this region and be near me, you and your children and your grandchildren, your flocks and herds and all you have. I will provide for you there. Because 5 years of famine are still to come, otherwise you and your household and all who belong to you will become destitute. You can see for yourselves that so can my brother Benjamin, that is really I who is speaking to you. Tell my father all about all the honor accorded to me in Egypt and about everything you have seen, and bring my father here quickly. Then he threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept, and Benjamin embraced him weeping, and he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. Afterwards his brothers talked to him. When the news reached Pharaoh's place that Joseph's brothers had come, Pharaoh and all his officials were pleased. Pharaoh said to Joseph, tell your brothers, do this. Load your animals and return to the land of Canaan, and bring your family and your families back to me, and I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you can enjoy the fat of the land. In your times of famine, church, this morning, the Lord will provide. His provision might not come in the way that you expect, but needless to say, he will make a way. I'm telling you now, in your place of famine, the Lord will provide. It mightn't look like the way you think, but needless to say, he will make a way. A famine to a feast. The fat of the land was what was promised. An invitation that changed everything, but it takes a bit on our behalf to come. See, the feast looks absolutely incredible. We look at this and we think, yeah, I want that. I want the fat of the land. That's what I'm aiming for. But we don't want to take the step closer. And in order to receive that, in order to receive the fat of the land, in order to receive from a place of famine to a place where there's a feast, there's some walking that needs to take place on our behalf. Our position needs to change. If we look back at chapter 44, there was also another invitation. And Joseph, when he was revealing himself to his brothers, and before even Joseph had said to him, this is I that is Joseph, there was a few tests that went on along the way. And he gives them some grain and he sends them on their way. And some of you might know this story already. And he purposely puts a cup in Benjamin's bag and he sends them off. And he sends someone out and goes, check all their bags. Because Joseph was able to do whatever he wanted. He goes, go out and check all their bags. And whoever has the cup in the bag, bring it back. But he knew before it had gone out. But I think Joseph was at a place where he just wanted to test them. And so when Joseph opened each of their bags, and he said, whoever has that cup in the bag will become my slave. So when they all agreed, because they thought at that point, there's nothing in our bags, there's only in our bags what he placed already, and sure, they all thought they were innocent. And little behold, there in Benjamin's bag was the cup. And Joseph turned around and said to Benjamin, you know what? You're going to be my slave. And at that point, Benjamin could do nothing about it. It wasn't his fault. He didn't do nothing to have that cup in his bag. He didn't do anything to even be in that position. And this morning, maybe you're enslaved by something. And this morning you might say, you know what, Áine, I'm bound down to something. And maybe it's not your fault this morning. But this invitation is still for you to come. See, Benjamin couldn't get out of that place by himself. If you look at that story, when Benjamin stood and the brothers were like, you can't take Benjamin, because if you take Benjamin, then we have to go back to our father, and our father's not able for that. He'll die if he finds out that Benjamin's not here. And the very person who actually threw Joseph into slavery was like, you know what? Take me instead. I'll stand up and I'll take Benjamin's place. I'll be the one that'll become your slave. See, Benjamin couldn't get out of that pit by himself. He needed someone to step forward and be like, you know what? I'm going to take his place. And this morning, church, Christ has done the exact same thing for you and I. He has said, we're in the place of Benjamin in our lives, and we're like, you know what? We can't get out of this. We're sinners. We need somebody. We need a savior. And just like that, Jesus stepped up and was like, you know what? I'm going to pay the price. But I'm telling you now, it didn't stop there. The invitation didn't stop there. It didn't stop where he was at. Jesus is now saying, you know what? Now you know I'm Lord of your life. Now it's time to take a step closer. Everything that you face, I just haven't become your Savior. I want to be your Lord. I just don't want to be your Savior. I want to be Lord over every situation you face. And you know what? I'm standing here and I'm going to be transparent. It's hard to say every day, God, you are Lord over my life. Especially when our reality doesn't match God's promises. When we look at our situations and we're like, God, where are you? Where are you in this? See, over the last few weeks, I faced disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. And the Lord is like, you know what? I'm challenging you to dance upon your disappointment on you. In it, if you just come a wee bit closer to me. In it, if you just let me reveal who I am. In it, if you just let me see what authority I have in your life. Things can change. From a famine to a feast. If we allow God to reveal himself in that way. But it takes us to go, you know what? I need to see who you were. See, I didn't realize the potential I had that day. I didn't realize the power my big brother had until I seen him in light. Until I stepped forward and was like, there's my big brother. And this morning, we can't declare that he's our big brother until we see him for who he is. It becomes empty. There's no weight to it. We've got to see who God is. Benjamin could do nothing about his situation until someone stepped in his place. It gave Ben a way out. You can't do it on your own strength. If you did, Benjamin could have done it in this story and said, you know what? Sure, what can I do? But he couldn't do anything. And you will never move from that place of famine in your life on your own strength until you accept the invitation to come closer. And it's not just a once-off invitation, it's a daily invitation that we get to go closer to Christ. While accepting that, then you become an agent of change. And it gives you the ability to feed others. See, at that point, the provision that was supplied to them, not only did it feed them, but they brought it back and fed their families. They fed their friends around them. And this morning, when God does something in your life, when he reveals himself to you, when you draw closer to him, it's not just for you. You then become an agent of change where you can step out and be like, you know what? People don't even realize that they're hungry out in this world. They don't even realize that they need to be fed. And there's an invitation out there for us to speak into different situations. There's many's a conversation. I was in a taxi the other day, and this guy was like picking me up outside the church. He's like, do you work in there? What's going on there? And I was almost shocked. I was like, oh gosh, he's asking me about church. Like, as if God wouldn't give me that opportunity. Like, as if I was like, God, just give me the opportunities. And then when God gives me the opportunity, I'm like, who gave me that opportunity? Like, second guessing God after praying for it. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, you know what? I was like, yeah, like, and we were talking about God, and I was saying how much God had done in my life. And he was like, that's quite interesting. Like, I've never met anyone your age who's so expressive about God. And then I got out of the car and I was going into my house and I was like, my mum's like, you have to been sitting outside the house there for 15 minutes talking to your man in the taxi. And I'm like, I know, and guess what it was about? God? She's like, really? I was like, yeah, I got to talk to him about God and the church and what I've been doing in the church and the youth group and my mom. And then I got a conversation with my mom about God again and another opportunity. And I'm like, God, if I only realised that people don't know they're hungry, but they don't necessarily know that they need to be fed. And I was saying, I have that food that God has given me so that I can share with others and feed them as well, so that God can use me in that situation. See, Joseph was used by God to bring restoration to his family, but also to save the nation of Israel. And God is still in the business, as I pray this morning, of bringing restoration where needed this morning. He's still in the business of bringing dead things to life. So you look at that and you think, Joseph's father would have thought at the time that Joseph was dead. But the very thing that he thought was dead was very much alive and active. And the thing that you declare or say that's dead in your life this morning, God is able to resurrect that this morning and bring life. He is able to restore it. He is able to rebuild it. I don't care your situation. I don't care how hard you think it is. I don't care how you look at it and you think, you know what, this is a failure. I've declared it dead. God's resurrection power can come into that and bring it to life. Very active. And I'm telling you now, there's not one situation that God can't turn around this morning in your life, in your children's lives, in your friend's life, in your neighbour's life. But what we've got to do is take a step closer. What did Joseph acquire these skills needed for this big, massive operation? It was during his 13 years he spent in Potiphar's house and in prison. And as he faced the afflictions of being rejected, falsely accused and being forgotten, it was in those times that God rebuilt him. Rebuilt him for something greater so that he was able to rule and reign, if you want to know, in that situation. And as we look at the Bible, it says in Genesis 50:20, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, to saving of many lives. And I've said it time and time again, what God is doing in you right now, what might seem like an area of famine, when he brings you, not if he brings you, when he brings you into that place where there's a feast, it's not just for you. Remember, it's not something that we get to hold on tightly. It's so that you and I can be an agent of change and bring it out and bless somebody else. But the thing about it is we've got to change our position this morning, church. God can do the same for you and me and truly make us fruitful through our afflictions when they come. And the invitation is sent out this morning. It was an invitation that changed absolutely everything. Everything that blurred his brother's vision. Everything that declared to be higher than Joseph at the time. But when you look at it, Joseph was still higher. He was able to press down on laws. He was able to pass laws. He was able to be that person who, in every need, he calculated up the amount of food that was needed at the time and was like, you know what, here is needed here. And when I'm telling you, when you're going through those rough times, God is able to meet every need that you have according to his glorious riches. Not according to ours, but according to his. Every need we have can be met by him this morning. But I'm telling you now, it's your choice whether you come or not. I'm continuously going to come to God because I know through him that I'm not enough without him. I can't do anything. I'm like, if I could identify with anyone in that story this morning, it's Benjamin. I can't do anything on my own strength. I need somebody to step in my place, to take my place. A price, when you look at it, a price, Benjamin at the time didn't do anything for it, but Christ stepped in. His brother stepped in and took that place. And just for you and I, Christ steps in for us as well and takes that place. But the invitation is set out for you to come this morning. And whatever that might look like in your life, it doesn't have to necessarily be at the altar, but it could be a change of position in your life this morning, that something needs to change. So that you can see God for who he is. You have a big brother this morning who loves you so much and will fight for you through every situation that you face. Can take you out of a place of famine and place you where there's a feast. But the invitation is for you to come.
Thanks for watching the video. We hope that you enjoyed what you saw. If you did, can you just click on the thumbs up button for us? That would be fantastic. We have some more videos that you can watch, and we hope that you'll enjoy them as well. And don't forget to subscribe.